Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Today's episode is part one of an interview I did with an estranged father. And part two will air next Sunday, so on June 25th, because today is June 18th and it's Father's Day. So I wanted to acknowledge the estranged fathers out there. It's interesting, over the last several weeks and months, I've had more contact with estranged dads who have reached out. I do have to say that the majority, well, maybe not the majority, maybe about half and half. Half of them have reached out at the request of their adult child. Their adult child has referred them to the podcast, and then they reached out to me for consultation and coaching. And then the other half are fathers who have reached out because they are estranged and are seeking support and being able to have a voice. As most of you know, I work with mainly estranged moms. It's a rare occasion that I do get a coaching client that is a dad, and I wish I wish I had referrals for dads who are estranged. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of support groups and such that are strictly for dads. So if anyone has that information and would like to forward that to me, I am happy to pass it along to the fathers who do reach out to me seeking support. I find many dads are looking for support from a male father who has experienced estrangement and are not necessarily super comfortable with working with me as their coach. And I totally understand that. So if you are aware of support services for dads who are estranged, please reach out to me so that I can forward that information on to those who reach out to me. And I can be reached at theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Again, theestrangedheart@gmail.com. I hope you will enjoy this interview with this estranged dad of two adult children and garner some insight as to maybe some differences that dads experience. And be sure to tune in next week for part two of this interview. It was almost an hour and about an hour and 10 or 15 minute interview that I did with dad. And so yeah, my heart goes out to you dads. I've talked with several fathers who are just absolutely heartbroken and super emotional over this silence and with their children. So I hope that you'll find special meaning in today's episode. So you have these two sons, early to mid 20s, and tell me what is it like? I mean, when you reached out to me, I was honest, and that I've worked with two estranged dads since I've been doing this work. I worked with them in conjunction with their wife, the mom, and I never, fathers don't reach out. They don't. I'm in no contact with them. So I'm curious as to, by nature, I'm simply curious, but
from a father's perspective, what is this like for you?
It's devastating. The stress is enormous. Every day I feel like before my feet hit the floor, I'm hit by a train.
Mm.
Um, it's really consuming. And one thing I want to point out is that in our household, the gender roles were reversed. In that my wife was the chief breadwinner, and I was a stay-at-home parent. And I did everything that a stay-at-home parent does. And I think because of that, I had an unusually close relationship, a father-son relationship,
Right.
than most dads. So there's that. Mine was the face they saw the most when they were growing up.
Okay. So you stayed at home all of
Yeah,
their growing up years? Is that
it's about 8 to 10 years, I think.
okay? Well, that's a good number of years. So, um, when you think about what this might look like, before we started recording, you mentioned, this they've gone dark. They have indicated they don't want any contact with you. What
Mm.
what does that feel like when you think about what if they never do? What from
Uh,
your dad's heart, what does that feel like?
that's my biggest fear.
Mhm.
You know, I think that people are well intended when I discuss this with them for the first time, and their stock response is, "Don't worry, they'll be back."
Mm.
And I'm not sure that that's true. And given the state of things 5 years on, I have no reason to suspect that it will be anytime soon, which is horrifying to me.
Yeah. Not to mention all the things you're missing out on in the
Oh,
milestone events in their life, right?
yeah. I mean, they one graduated high school, the other graduated college in 2020, and in a way, luckily, there was COVID, so
Right.
there was no graduation really, and I don't feel like I missed anything, but I think that would have been really traumatic had I been excluded from a physical ceremony.
Right. When it comes to, I mean, obviously they've gone dark, so there's been no holidays together, there's been no vacations together, there's been no
Right,
birthdays. Uh,
right.
when you think about the possibility of reconciliation, is that something that you can allow yourself to go there and think about, or do you
Oh,
not think about that? Like what?
absolutely, every day. Yeah, I mean that is my goal and has been my goal this entire time, has been to first let them know that I love them and I miss them, but also um, I'm willing to talk about these things and make amends where necessary. Um, there was something else I was going to say. Um, I can't think of it. But yeah, I'm certainly open to this, uh, and it's something I do wish and hope for constantly.
Right. What do you think? Do you know reasons why they don't want to reconcile at this point in time? Have they
Yeah,
been specific? And if they have been specific, I mean, you don't have to go into detail, but give us an idea of what those reasons might be from them.
uh, I wanted to go back just a moment because I remembered what I was going to say. I think one of the big problems in all of this, and one of the key factors in all of this, is that my ex-wife talked about the divorce with my oldest son, who then talked about it with my youngest son. I refused to talk about it.
Mm.
It's divorce rule number one, and I would not allow them to you know, undermine their relationship with their mother. And I'm sorry, I forgot your last question.
That's okay. I want to stay on the subject for just a second. Because I think divorce is prevalent in a lot of estrangement situations, right?
Yep.
Starting off with alienation, and then as the kids become adults, then it ends up in estrangement. You know, their quote unquote air quote choice, based off of the information they've been fed. So when you say that you refused to talk about that, have they come to you and said, Dad, we talk about this? Is that
my oldest son angrily insisted that I do that. And I told him in no uncertain terms, I can't do that without throwing your mother under the bus. And I refused to do it.
okay.
I mean, that may sound self-serving, but it's well documented. Yeah, and I can pinpoint the exact time in the divorce proceedings where things flipped. And that involved standard negotiation tactics that my ex-wife thought erroneously was somehow out of the ordinary. And she knew what she was getting into. So anyway, there was that flip. And it was particularly painful because this was hot on the heels of my losing a second brother in a year. And it was really, really hard. I expected there to be some level of support. Instead, when I got back, the only thing was, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Yeah.
So some level of support from the kids.
Yeah.
Regarding
Whereas I had the previous year when another brother died, they were super supportive. And, you know, after the second time, there was a moment in the divorce proceedings that I think my ex-wife rather, presented in isolation without context. As a result, they got a very selective narrative that villainized me and flattered her.
Just out of curiosity, what was her relationship with the kids?
She had a great relationship with the kids. You know, she was a great mom. She's a good person. I just think she did a terrible thing. Yeah, they were close.
Okay. So close with both of you.
Yes.
A good family unit, as far as you could tell.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Any history of abuse or addiction issues, anything along those lines?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So you've reached out.
Mm-hmm.
The attempts at reaching out have not been successful.
No.
In being able to forge a reconciliation of any kind at this point. So what's the plan? How do you move forward from here?
You know, I'm sure you know about this stuff. There's DBT and CBT notion of radical acceptance. And, you know, I've tried that and it works until it doesn't.
Right.
And, you know, I can concentrate on those things if I make an effort, but eventually that just, it feels temporary. So I don't know. I get, maybe you can shed some light on this. I get competing advice on how to try to communicate with them, with one being, hey, they've made a decision and my contacting them despite their saying not to, be read as disrespect, not recognizing them as adult individuals. On the other hand, I've been told you need to keep trying. And for instance, the reason being, as someone said, no one ever resented a parent, an alienated parent who tried and was persistent about it. And the only thing I do at this point that I feel comfortable with and think that it would be respecting their boundaries is to send a generic Christmas card to my ex-wife, where the kids presumably spend Christmas, just saying Merry Christmas to everyone there. So I'm not singling out anyone, specifically my youngest son, who has told me, in no uncertain terms, do not contact me.
Okay. I tend to, especially, they're still young, right? And I do think that there is value in staying and making attempts when they're young. Do I think that it needs to be, 4 times a year or that type of thing? Not necessarily. I think that this also has to be weighed by what you're able to tolerate and cope with and deal with for yourself, because in this balancing act, the last thing we want to have happen with a parent is this constant reaching out and it damaging your mental health just over and over and over. And you get to a point where even when they do come back, you're so out of it because of the trauma that has happened to you through this, right? And so I think that it has to be balanced with, again, something similar to once a year, an attempt. I'm still here. You're still on my mind. I'm still thinking of you, kind of thing. But again, every parent's different. Some parents can tolerate that, and some parents, it just absolutely rips them to shreds every time they think about it and take any sort of action towards that. So with that in mind, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that I both apply. That I do make an attempt, not frequently, not as much as I used to. I used to reach out at birthdays, and I reached out at graduations. I never heard anything back, but around the holidays, I feel the need to, just tell them that I'm here. On the other hand, the predictable rejection is, crushing. But I think maybe at this point, I expect it. So I try not to let it affect me as much as it had in the past. It's not to say that it's not traumatic, but I guess it's more tolerable.
Right. Well, and that tends to happen as time goes on and it becomes less intense. It's still there, but the pain and suffering tends to become more dull, if you will. So when you think about estrangement, and if you were to talk to other dads or moms, other people about this, what would you say to folks about estrangement who are experiencing this?
I would describe estrangement as grief in reverse. In both, you have some traumatic event with normal grief, you are able to move on and integrate this loss into your life, and things get better.
Mhm.
With estrangement, it doesn't get better over time, it gets worse. And I think that even given what you say about the hurt, that aspect of it being somewhat dull, it's still crushing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's terrible, I didn't. One of the reasons it gets worse is the stigma. Uh, 5 years. Wow, what did you do?
Mm. Mm.
It's difficult to convey to people that the complexities of this thing, and yeah, I mean, if I let it, it could be debilitating. So yeah, I mean, I guess I could also say that with resources like you and others, that there is help out there.
Mhm.
And it does help to know that there are others going through this.
Right.
I think in my case, it would be, given my history with these resources, Facebook pages and your community, is that there are not a lot of dads.
Yeah.
So I feel like, for the same reason I would choose a therapist who's a man and is roughly my age and has had some of the same life experiences as me, I would like some sort of community, however small, with men who are in this situation. And I haven't found any.
Yeah. I have to tell you that I hear this often from wives who's, speaking on behalf of their husbands. They're like, oh my gosh, I wish there was something for my husband, because he is suffering in silence. He doesn't feel like he can talk to me or to, other women and things like this. And so I mean, yes, there needs to be a community where men can feel emotionally safe enough to come
Uh-huh.
in and have
Uh-huh.
vulnerable conversations about this, right?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question. And I think I know the answer to this question, but I'd like to hear it from you. What do you think is stopping those dads from reaching out?
I think there are two things. I think that some dads really come at it from the perspective of, well, they're adults, they've made their decision, and there you
Mm,
have it, right?
yeah.
The others, I think there's shame. I don't know how to reach out. I've never had to reach out. I've never had to deal with anything like this in my life.
Yeah.
Where do I go? What do I say? Who do I contact?
Yeah.
I think that there is this level of, I listen to my wife all the time. I really just don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's a mixed bag. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that's true. And that's just, not to overgeneralize, but men are more stoic and less apt to
Yes.
make themselves vulnerable in that way, and to reach out. And that's part of toxic masculinity. It's just, we either directly or indirectly teach boys
Mhm.
that it's not okay. Boys don't cry.
Yep.
And so I just think that that's the way men are conditioned
Mhm.
in our culture, is to be uncomfortable with these kinds of things.
That whole
Yeah.
suck it up and,
Oh yeah.
deal with it attitude, right?
Hmm.
Mhm. Which is, um, when we stuff our emotions, and I talk to moms about this as well, but especially for men, stuffing the emotions, and then we have physical illnesses and all sorts of other things that come about because we're not talking about our feelings,
Yeah.
talking about our emotions. So I wish I had I wish I had the answer, because I see, just in my community, like I said, through the wives, I see a lot of men who are suffering,
Yeah. Yeah.
that are heartbroken, just absolutely heartbroken.
You said in your email that there was a marked difference between how moms and dads bear this, and I agree. Obviously, I wasn't the one physically who carried them and brought them into this world, and of course, they're going to have a stronger bond with their mother. Um, but Yeah, so I mean, I think dads are at a disadvantage with that, but you're right also when you said there are two different types of suffering.
Yeah.
And I think that has to do with what we just talked about. It's in terms of vulnerability and emotional articulation and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there's, in my community, with the wives, they're like, my husband, they won't talk about it, and they really don't want to hear me talk about it anymore.
Wow.
Right. And
Wow.
so there's a, so this is where we also end up with marriages that fall apart after
Mhm.
estrangement, because there's just so much emotional volatility that's happening within
Yeah,
the family unit, um, that folks can't deal with it. And so
yeah,
then the demise of, not only a parent-child relationship, but now a spousal relationship. So
yeah,
yeah,
sure.
it is. It's just this. I talk all the time about the ripple out effect, right? All of this, you're not just estranged from your child. It affects every relationship you have.
Oh yeah.
It moves out and beyond just you and this child, and it's traumatic.
Mhm.
It's devastating. And how do you, I was just contacted by an estranged mom this morning, who sent gifts for her grandkids, and they were returned. This was the first
Yeah.
outreach, and so she's devastated, and she's like, now I need to know how to let go. How do I let go? How do you let go of your children?
I don't think
Right.
it's possible. I
Right.
don't think it's possible.
Right. So then how do you live with this? How do you continue? And I'm asking you specifically, how do you maneuver through life on a day-to-day basis with this cloud that is forever hanging over your head?
I think that I have a really strong network of friends
Hmm.
who are, you know, good friends. We share everything, and um, so they understand, and they're really supportive and encouraging. Um, I have brothers and sisters-in-law who do the same thing. One, as I mentioned, is a therapist, and her, you know, she's especially comforting because she knows what to say.
Right.
Um, and also just trying to keep busy.
Hmm.
Um, I recently became a school teacher,
Okay.
and I think that maybe unconsciously one of the reasons I did that was to be around kids
Hmm.
because I couldn't do it with my own. Um, and that sort of happened, but in a way also it was a painful reminder
Yeah.
that I have no relationship with my kids. When I see the healthy, functional relationships these kids have with their parents, it's very painful.
Hmm.
Um, so at the same time, it's as a first year teacher, especially, it's extremely time consuming. So being distracted helps.
Right.
I try to keep fit and eat right and get enough sleep. So I'm taking care of myself in those ways. But it it's difficult to outrun.
Hmm.
Eventually, I think, especially during downtimes, I just finishing up a week of spring break, and I had a lot of time to ruminate,
Mm.
and more than usual.
Right.
And it was particularly hard. Anyway, friends, family, keeping busy, all the normal things that people should do to look after their health.
If you could talk to your kids today,
Yeah.
what would you tell them?
Relative to the situation, or just,
Whatever you would want them to know.
the thing that happens with me, I know you've talked about anger on your show, is
Mhm.
that I wake up every morning and I'm thinking about angry conversations I want to have with my ex-wife and my kids. And, that doesn't do me any good,
Right.
but I don't think that I could, talk to them directly and say, hey, you were manipulated. Here's how.
Mm.
But I don't want to do that because, even now, I don't want them alienated from two parents.
Right.
So I think that I would just, it's been said that reconciliation is a marathon, not a sprint.
Mhm.
I would just at least try to get them to talk to me or see them, and kind of do things slowly and not get follow their lead. If they want to talk about it, I could give them broad strokes but not details.
Right.
But I'm more willing to discuss it now than I was
Mhm.
beforehand, because they're no longer living under my ex-wife's roof.
Right.
So yeah. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. We were talking about what you would want to say to them.
Oh, what I would want to say to them. It's just that, I'm here. I love you. Yeah, that I've lived in California for most of my life, but I moved back to the East Coast for a couple of years to go to graduate school and to help look after my parents who were very sick. But I always knew I was going to come back.
Mhm.
And the primary reason being, despite the fact that it's so expensive to live here, is that I wanted to be around, if and when this thing resolves. I don't want them, if they're home from, they moved to Texas, for instance, and, they're home for the holidays. I want to see them too,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I just want to be nearby.
Sure.
Because I think that it would hurt more. It did hurt more, being far away from me.
Mm. Mhm. How do you think that this estrangement experience affects other relationships you have in your life?
Uh, in terms of friends, I think that it's a problem because they're really sensitive to the fact of what's going on in my life, and at times I feel like they sort of downplay interactions with their kids.
Mm.
They don't. Some just try not to talk about their kids, which I'm more than willing to talk to anyone about it. But I think people feel they just don't know what to say.
Mhm.
Um, there's only so much support they can give.
Right.
Um, and with new people, and this is a problem that I'm having, is that at what point do you disclose that?
Mm.
You know, I'm on the dating apps, and if I were to meet, a potential partner, or just even somebody who I was going to date for a while, at what point do you drop that bomb? Because as I said, that can be interpreted as a red flag. Like this person did something terrible. Do I want to take on that pain? So it certainly affects my relationships in that way. I think people overcompensate for how they think I might be feeling. And it's true, I am feeling that way. And I'm aware of the idea of empathy fatigue. I don't want to take, suck all the oxygen out of the room. But yeah, it's hard. I get different kinds of advice from clinicians, especially. It's this, well, this has happened and it was a messy divorce and it's unfortunate, but I keep trying. Which, she doesn't have any experience with this type of situation, but I'm just not sure how that would work. I don't know how I would react for someone telling me that. Because again, it's something so horrible for most parents to imagine that yeah, I struggle with it, what to do and at what point, and whether or not people who are giving me really reductive advice, if I'm comfortable with that. So I don't know. And different people will.
This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent, and that you are able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show, or following us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/Estranged Mothers Support Group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.